Hello and welcome to DIY Data 5. I am Michael Urig. This is May 19th, 2021, and this is episode 23, Learning Well. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about what I think are some of the most important things about this concept of learning. Learning to me is not just the concept of going to school, K through 12, 4 years of college, and then going out into the world and you're done. Learning is a lifelong experience. It is a thing that never stops. And like I've said many times, we have to continuously be learning, and we can't just, stop when, people stop trying to teach us. As I talk about projects, we have to seek after skill improvement. We have to seek out information all the time. So I want to take an episode and actually talk about how we can learn well, and how we can have this mindset about learning. This is going to be a joint DIY and dad kind of thing, because really when it comes to learning, we have to not only think about how we learn, and I've talked about how we help educate our children and stuff like that. I've talked about in our household, we are a homeschooling household, so obviously we've taken the education of our children very seriously to the point where we actually do it ourselves, but we do also reach out and use other educational resources. We use public libraries, we use museums, and all that type of stuff as well. So there are benefits to societal education, obviously, as well. I don't teach myself everything. People generate the material we use. So I want to take an episode and talk about how we can waste less time and less frustration by understanding what education is, the purpose of education, and how we can participate in our own educational journey. So let me start off with just all of that to go into this. So as a parent, college graduate, like I said, I had a 2-year associate, 4-year college degree, former military member over about 15 years and change. I'm losing track now. I'm a DIYer, so like I've always talked about, there's plenty of education requirements if you continue in that lifestyle. And I continue to see many sides of the education world, with my own kids, other things that I partake in. I teach different things when it comes to personal finance now, and things at work. If there's a project going on or a new thing going on, I try and develop education there. I've seen many different sides of training, and with that, I've partaken in things that are meant to develop plans to make the education process in those different worlds better, for both the student and for the educator, the person giving the training. Different initiatives to improve the training method, different initiatives to bring the education from a central location out to the students, and initiatives to make the education better for the students themselves. And I've seen a lot of different projects, and a lot of things have been good, a lot of things fall flat on their face. And I'm not going to talk about those specifically, but I'm going to talk about some of the things that I think are important that I've taken away from that, and also some of the things that have really have grown close to me when it comes to what we really all need to understand when it comes to education as a whole, the process of education, the heart of education and learning. And after all of those, I think this is the key important stuff. So I want to start off with, why do we learn? A lot of times people are like, you got to go to school because that's just the law. You got to go K through 12. You got to do it. That's actually not the reason why we learn. Learning is actually very more primal. We learn to survive. Baby comes out of the womb. What's the first thing they got to do? They got to learn how to breathe. What do? They take a deep breath. If they don't, old manner is the doctor slaps the baby's butt. They have to take that deep breath to cry. They've just learned how to breathe outside of the womb. Learning starts off instantaneously from the minute life comes about. A rock does not learn. It's a natural instinct. It's just something we have to do. It's an ongoing thing from the day life begins to the day life ends. So that's the first thing, is it's a natural thing to do. You always have to be learning. Now, beyond the natural instinct of learning, there has to be something beyond that. Because if it's not beyond natural instinct, there's no other purpose for it. So natural instinct's going to kick in. It's going to kick in for all living things. But beyond that, why do we do it? So we have two different areas. We have the future aspects of why we're learning, and we have the current aspects of why we're learning. So the future aspects of why we learn is why we go to school, why we do college, why people go to marriage seminars, read books on how to do things better, and stuff like that. People want to get better at whatever it is they can get better at for the future. They want to educate themselves so they can be better at something. Really, that's the only reason to put yourself through that. Because if there is no future benefit in doing any of that, why do it? You're not going to put your kid through 12 years of education and all of that time and energy if there wasn't a benefit to it, whether for them or for the society. Because let's be honest, if we go back to pre-industrial age, if there was no benefit to the society of an education-based system like there is now, it would not have been developed. It would not have been developed. They would not have taken the kids out of the factories or out of the fields and stuff like that and sat them down to learn as much as we have them learn if it wasn't a benefit to both them and society as a whole to have them become educated, to have them learn a lot of the stuff, because we knew it was going to better the society as a whole. We knew it was going to better them and bring up everybody to have a base sense of education. So the future aspect of education is really why we have this whole sense of public education, and it is great. I understand the concept of it. I wholeheartedly agree with it, and like I said, we homeschool. We use that same concept of education just in the home method. So that's the future aspect of why do we learn. The other aspects of is currently, why do we learn right now? What do we do in the moment or in the next day or two kind of thing? Obviously, as a DIYer, we have projects. What are we doing right now? What do we have to learn? Some of that might be based on past learning, and we need to do it. So we might learn something right now. It's kind of the same thing. You got a task you got to do. You go out to get the knowledge that somebody developed at some point because of their future aspect information that they need to know, and you just went with it, and that's the same kind of learning. You have specific situations that you need to figure out how to get from here to there, directional learning. If you don't know how to get there, you got to figure it out. So you're going to look it up in a map, you're going to ask a friend for direction. That's still learning. That's a situational type learning. Or if you need to, figure out if you like something or not, you got to taste it. That's a situational type learning, and you're going to learn if you're going to continue to learn that way. So those are current types of learnings, and if you like to learn by experiences with food, you're called a foodie. If you like to learn, if you like to learn with adrenaline, you're sometimes called an adrenaline junkie or an adventurist or something like that. So those are situation type learnings. Do you like to do stuff like that? That's a type of learning, actually. And then there's some types of enjoyment that is learning that is purely for enjoyment. And actually, everything we do is really to do for pure enjoyment. It's really to enjoy and to progress our lives. If all the learning we did never brought the person as a whole and the society that we're in future enjoyment, future progression, future stimulation that we as a human being, as a living entity enjoyed, we wouldn't do it. It's how we're made. A baby wouldn't cry and breathe or feed if they didn't like it. Natural instinct is driven off of desire. Our desire is what drives us to do things, and so is learning. So if we understand that basic drive of why we do anything, really, and we apply that the same thing to education, we actually just start to understand why we do education. Why do we learn? Why do we want to learn? If you find a subject that you like to do, you tend to do better. It's because you like to do it. So if you like to do that and you do better, and you don't like to do this subject and you tend to do worse, if you can figure out a way to like a subject better, you might do better in it, or like a topic better. And that's how, we've talked about projects as well, talking about your passions. If you're passionate at something, gaining the skills are easier. So that's why we learn is the base desire, and then just understanding where it fits in like the future concept versus the current concept is really what it is. So underlying the why do we learn, you have your different situations, future, which is kind of driven again based on that that typical type of curriculum style. You have your current, which is more of your if you're trying to do a self-help or a self-driven kind of thing, maybe an online tutorial or an app-based kind of learning that you're just doing it on your own, and then you have the kind that's experiential driven learning as well. But then again, it's all driven by enjoyment of the self. If you're not getting anything out of it, if you're not getting anything out of the outcome in the long run, societal outcome enjoyment, it's not going to be driven by society, so it's probably not going to stick around. And if individual enjoyment's not there, it's not going to be driven by the individual. So now, when should we learn? Okay, so overall, when should we learn? Well, as I've described before, it kind of always happens, but we should always be trying to attain some new kind of learning. Like, yes, I was saying we have the always learning that happens, the instinctual learning. Like, if you try some new food, you're going to learn. Do I like it? Do I not? If you did something that was new and you got hurt, you're going to learn maybe I shouldn't do it that way or shouldn't do it at all. You're going to learn. That's all natural instinctual learning. But new kinds of learning you should always be trying to attain as well. Now, I'm not saying you should always be in college. I'm not saying you should always be trying to get a new degree or learn some complicated thing. We should always be trying to learn something new every so often. This keeps your brain in a sense of elastic state where it's ready and capable of kind of growing. Because when you stop, trying to, it gets harder and harder. So you're always in that area of learning. And younger, they say, kids absorb things like a sponge. Well, that's because their brain is so used to learning all the time in the first couple of years because they're constantly instinctually learning all this new stuff that they never learned. And it's learn. And then as soon as they get to school, we're trying to teach them a lot too. So it's just a lot more stuff they're learning and they're used to learning. So they just absorb it quicker. But for us, what we're going to talk about is, the specific medium will change as you get older. Like I said, when you're younger, it's purely instinctual. And then, parents will usually introduce, some basic concepts of structured learning. We'll start introducing shapes, colors, numbers. Maybe we'll start utilizing like a preschool or kindergarten kind of concepts as well. Maybe different teaching methods as well, depending on your preferences. And then eventually you'll go into some sort of grade school typically, or like in our case, homeschool. After that, there'll be college or trade school. Those are the quote unquote younger years typically. Yes, there are some senses out there that are a little different. And then you'll have the extracurriculars that are also in there. You'll have sports, you'll have things like arts and all these other areas that may fall into typical education arenas, public schools, private schools, that they'll also teach those, but those aren't the what people consider education sources. They're other types of things that we are learning as well. They're not book knowledge. They're athletic knowledges and stuff like that. But there are other things you're learning. You're still learning. Learning a sport is actually pretty important in my mind. Sportsmanship, conduct, rule following, the ability to cooperate with other people. Sports I think are very important for a child to learn, even if they're not good with it. We have children of ours that we've had them in dance, we've had them in gymnastics, and some of them love it, some of them don't. Not that they hate it, but it's just they might not like it. So we have them in there for a little while. We have them go through it, like I've mentioned before. And after a while, if we realize they don't want to keep doing it, we have them try something else, and that's perfectly fine. Some kids like things more than others, and we just have them try different things, and that's the process of learning. So another medium as you start getting a little older, so usually like the high school age, young adult, and full adult, is being self-taught. So obviously you start taking the reins into yourself. This is, going to college, they start to really hone in on the, here's the material, you got to read it and understand it, and then you only come to me if you have questions. The office hours kind of concept. You got to do the project, that kind of stuff, and it's really on you to do the work, which is kind of interesting to me that it's like I'm going to college to learn this, and I have to kind of already know it before I get there. It really depends. It's really interesting. It's like I might as well teach it to myself and let the program fill in the blanks. It's like this could be done without a person for the most part. And then if I need office hours, then I could pay for those extra instead of paying a tenured person. But that's either here nor there. Education is structured the way it is now. Who knows what it'll be in the future? So the way self-taught is, you go out, you look for the material on your own, or you try something out on your own, and you just learn. You learn by doing. You learn by reading. And that's just the process. Is you're trying to learn something yourself. You're not having somebody feed it to you. Next would be continuing education programs. Towns will have these, local community colleges will have these, and stuff like that. So these are programs designed to carry on education of a different sort. So fill in the gaps, basically. These are good things for people who are trying to continue their education but still want some assistance. So that's the continuing education tracks. Or if you are in a certain career path and say you need additional education to maintain certain kind of accreditations, you might need continuing education as well. So these are things that you will need to do just because of your job. So those are some of the things that you always need to maintain. And then here's one that a lot of people don't think of when it comes to education, and it's really actually a great idea. I've seen it used it in the military, in my professional career now, in my church as well. The idea of mentors, mentor-mentee relationships. This is sometimes formal, sometimes informal. You will have somebody who you can trust and respect in a career field, in a personal manner. It depends on where you're looking to grow. And it's somebody you would reach out to, you talk to regularly, irregularly, but whatever the agreement would be, so that you can grow. Again, the purpose is to grow. And you want to have this person be, hopefully in a more experienced position in the area you want this relationship to be, and in an area where you want to be able to grow. So this is another area of education. So how do we learn? Different people will learn differently. Not everybody is the same. We all know this. So there are pretty much 4 ways people learn, and most people will be a combination of all of them. Nobody is just one way of learning. So you got read, watch, do, and listen. So most people will take in the information by either reading, watching, or listening to it. So you can watch somebody do something, and that could be on a video or in person. You can't watch them talk about it, obviously. But if you watch somebody do it, you might not retain it very well if you don't try it right afterwards. So you might be a watch doer. So you watch them, you try it. You watch them, you try it. And then you try it a bunch of times, and then boom, you got it. You'll be able to do it for the rest of your life. A good example is my wife and I. We went to do the rock climbing. We had to watch them make the different knots. I watched the guy do it once, did it a bunch of times, and now I'm pretty good with it. We gotta go get certified to make sure, a month later we're not forgetting it. So if we go back a bunch of times later, we're good. So that's a watch-do kind of learning mechanism. I'm very good at watching people do stuff and learning stuff. It was really helpful in the military because sometimes when you get new equipment, they need to send people down to learn how to set it up, use it, all that kind of stuff. I was a really good watch-do learner. Other kinds, again, reading manuals, reading the instructions that come with stuff, reading online technical guides, all that kind of stuff. Boring. If you're a reader, good on you. You're the ones who all that stuff was made for. I can follow it. I can do it if I need to. I'm usually the one who's happy when there's a searchable PDF. I will Control F whatever I need to. For you of those that don't know, Control F brings up the find box for most systems. Command F, I think, if you're a Mac user. And I will skip through that all day long. But if you are a reader and you love reading technical manuals, or you love reading the instruction manuals that come with things, they have tons of information. Sometimes I glaze over after it was printed in what day, or page 1, chapter 1. I'm done for. Now, if you want to give me tutorial videos on something, I'll watch a tutorial video and then I'll do it. Again, I'm a big doer when it comes to how to learn. And also listening. Listening is similar to watching, except for without the video content. You have the pure audio. It's a lot of this will be similar to lecture. So if you go to college, you're going to have lecture. High school, you have lecture. Usually that's also seeing people write on the board a lot. If you're in the lecture world, nowadays you have a lot of podcasts as well where you can listen and learn the different content and stuff like that. So listening is a big way of learning. I think a lot of people can learn that way, but the pitfall is you can also drown out the content if you're not being careful. A lot of people will put stuff on while they're driving in the car or while they're doing other tasks, and their attentions will be drawn away too quickly and they won't learn very easily. So understanding how you learn, and maybe or you or your children really, and really twisting the educational mechanism around that will really help you retain the information better and really make learning very, very enjoyable. So the next thing is an area I call again, 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 and again. One thing I want to point out is you got to keep up with your education. I made a big mistake. I did a DIY. If any of you are following me, you're going to see my comments under my own post. I did a project here. I installed some electrical lights and some electrical outlets, and I made a boo-boo. I did not reference wiring diagrams on how to do it right. I was like, oh yeah, I got this, and I just started doing it. I probably wasted a good 2.5 hours of my time because I had to go back and do it again. Luckily, I didn't damage anything. I didn't, have any problems, didn't get electrocuted or anything like that. I just wasted a lot of time because I had to go back and do wiring again. So utilize your educational resources. Don't think that just because you learned something, you don't need to re-educate yourself. And realize it's okay to keep educating yourself on the subject matter. So when it comes to the when is it over, never. You will be educating yourself for the rest of your life. Like I said, when you feel like you're done, it means because you're like, okay, I'm done, and you're dead. That's when you're done educating yourself. You will always come back to topics. You're going to feel like the broken record when it comes to learning things, especially in this DIY world or in the parenting world. Whether it's for your kids asking questions or you have multiple kids, you're going to feel like you never get away from the concept of changing diapers until diapers are gone. But then you know what? Your friends are going to have kids and you're going to be talking about diapers again. Or then your kids are going to have kids and you're going to be talking about diapers again. You're not going to get away from a topic. Why? Because this is the world and everything goes in cycles. So just remember that. The topics that you learn, the topics that you talk about, it's okay to keep re-educating yourself because you might learn something new. You might learn something better. So never stop learning about a subject, and it's always okay to realize that there might be something better, there might be something new, it might be something interesting. So be free in knowing that you can keep learning about a subject. Also use the digital world to your advantage, but realize, like I've said before, the digital world can be wrong. Don't feel like you need to reinvent the wheel. I didn't listen when I should have, stopped at almost midnight with the electrical when I'm trying to figure it out. But as soon as I stopped, sat down for a whopping 5 minutes to have some water before going to bed, I realized exactly what I did wrong with the electrical, and that made it about another hour before I could have gone to bed because I wanted to go down and fix it. But it took me only moments to realize the problem, and I didn't have to reinvent the wheel to figure it out. I didn't have to go testing a million times or anything like that. I did a quick Google search on how to properly do it, and I got an image with the wiring diagram that had I just looked at it before, I would have done it right. So again, don't reinvent the wheel. Use your digital resources for learning. And there's tons of them out there, whether it's for your kids, for you, for a friend. If you just want to learn something, Go look for it. You'll be surprised what it is. You use your public library resources. They'll have tons of digital resources as well nowadays. And most of them you can get now on your phone. Not just ebooks, not just audiobooks. There's other kinds of things you can get. Use them. Live your educational journey like you're a shark. Because if most people, if you've heard this before, if a shark stops moving, it can't breathe. Most sharks. I'm pretty sure there's a few that can. But if you stop moving in your educational life, you're pretty much going to get stagnant. Like I said, your brain stops learning. There's actually now apps out there that operate on the precedence that they can help your brain get younger with these different games that you do. Well, it's actually off of the premise that when you use your brain, when you you use education and you use mental stimulation, your brain can technically rebuild itself, but it's a very strenuous process. But if you start and you never really stop, you won't usually get to the point where hopefully your brain needs to rebuild itself. So get to a point where you feel like education is just a natural thing for you and you're always looking for something new. And you won't have to worry about being that shark that just can't breathe. And you'll actually feel pretty fulfilled because you'll always feel like you've learned something new. You'll always have something new to share with people. And it can be pretty interesting stuff, and people will be pretty shocked. And I also feel like it doesn't have to be elaborate things that you're learning. It could be something fun. It could be some interesting facts about islands out in the South Caribbean or whatever. Now, here's the biggest, last thing that I'm going to talk about. The responsibility, the who and the why of education. So the biggest thing that we hear in the DDO5 household are teaching our children is that not only is education important, because like I said, from the moment creation is in existence, it's constantly learning. And that is a lifelong thing, but it is the individual's responsibility to get the most out of their education. Whether it's, again, the systematic education through public, private, or whatever, but also the individual's self-driven education. Because again, nobody else is going to do it for you. Nobody else can put the information in your head. Everybody else can present information all they want. You can have an individual teacher try and teach you every way this way to Sunday. You can have parents try and teach you every way to Sunday. You can have everybody threaten you every which way to Sunday or blue moon, however, whatever way you want to talk about it. If you don't take the responsibility yourself, you are not going to learn. And if you're not going to learn, you're not going to grow, and you're not going to be, as I stated before, happy. You're not going to get to that point you want to be. And this is the thing that I've started talking about with our 11-year-old, because she's starting now to get to that point in her life where she's actually thinking of her future outside of our home. Not big, not like, oh, I can't wait to get out, but she's starting to think of those things that she would like to do a little bit as an adult. And I'm asking her those questions. Well, how are you going to go about that? What do you think you got to be able to do? And it's really now starting to translate into conversations about, well, how do you think you're going to get there? And so we're starting to talk about the whole process of, finishing school and possible education after grade school and stuff like that. And so we've been having these kinds of conversations. And sometimes she'll whine during school and how she doesn't like school. And we'll have the conversation of, well, whose responsibility is it that you get a good education? And at first she's like, well, it's your job. I'm like, well, no, it's our job to give you the material, but whose job is it to learn? And we've started having those conversations. So again, there's different educational resources. Like I was just saying, you have the teachers who present the material, you have the self-help content, and all these different you have the natural world that teaches us things all the time. Hot stove, natural world. Put your hand on it. You learn not to touch it because it's hot. That's the natural world. So different educational resources are around and available, but it's the individual's responsibility to learn. So when you take that and then you start trying to talk to your child about it, you got to also realize that you're going to have a child that's a self-starter that loves to learn everything. Like, if they'll just want to do education any way they can. but you're also going to have the one that only wants to do certain things, and that's okay. You help them understand that, you're really good over here, so that's great. Get through those and do what you have to, but we're going to work on these things as well. And make them understand that in the future you're going to have these choices, and sometimes you do have to make sure you make the choice that learn the other things as well, because those might be important. Being able to take hold of one's own education as an adult is important too, because many of us weren't taught as children that education is our responsibility. Like, a lot of times we will hear that, oh, it's, it was your parents' job to make sure you went to school, or it was the education system that failed this child, or a lot of these other things. So there are adults who actually believe that they were failed as a child, which I completely agree that there is the responsibility of parents to bring up their children, and the society has placed a heavy burden on educators to make sure children get a certain level of education, and children do need to be taught. But again, if the children actively refuse the education, there's nothing they can do. But we do have to raise up the children in a way that helps them get to that point, and that's what I was just referring to. But now I'm talking to adults. You, me, we're adults, right? So what do we do now if we realize, wow, I've kind of neglected myself as an edge on the education front? What do we do? Well, you change. You go and you go read a book. You go and you listen to a podcast, like you're doing right now, hopefully. You go and you look for something else to absorb. You go and you start that education process. Now, I have a feeling if you're listening to my podcast, you're already one of these kinds of people. You're already somebody that understands that education is important. You're doing that education thing for yourself. Try and encourage others. Encourage other people to listen to something new. Encourage people to have fun in their educational journey. Don't just push people to say, oh, you got to learn something different. Help them experience life in a way that they'll enjoy experiencing it, and it slowly, inch by inch, experience by experience, they'll get to an area where hopefully they realize that learning something new is actually beneficial to them. So if you have a sibling or a child, adult child possibly, that you really feel is not being fulfilled in their own life, it's probably because they're lacking in a self-education type of way. And children usually feel unfulfilled because they're not learning. If they're learning things, they're growing. And as they grow, they'll mature. And as they mature, they actually feel fulfilled. Because most children, pretty much all children, if they develop it normally, feel fulfillment with maturity, because they see themselves becoming like their parents. They see themselves becoming like adults. And that's really what drives a lot of children towards happiness, is seeing themselves come up and get closer to adulthood. They actually thrive on that concept, and that whole learning process helps them get there. Well, I pray you enjoyed today's episode. Again, Michael Yerg, DIY Data 5. You can find me on every podcast place that I can think of. If you find one that I'm not on, let me know. I'll see what I can do for it if that's your favorite one. You can find me on YouTube. This is the second episode on there. If you have any problems with it, please let me know as well. If you want to, you can email me. You'll find it in the show notes and stuff like that. But it should be podcast@DIY Data 5. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I hope you have a great 2 weeks. Talk to you later.